get stressed, that's the way that I get things done. From now to depression, then I sleep too long, and I hang around like a bomb. I think I'm going nowhere, and that makes me nervous. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright. Everybody's thinking about me, but I feel alright. Everybody's at the game, but I feel alright.
Did you really think that hospitalization would stop me? Don't look at me! I'm the #1 jaundice boy now, so I have to hide my beautiful money-making face behind a mask that I fashioned from hospital utilities. You think pissing in a dignity bottle will stop me putting a Jimquisition out? No, I might not be able to write, record and produce an entire Jimquisition, but what I can do is take one of the best Jimquisitions ever produced, a non-canon episode, because anything done before the YouTube era is non-canon, and have it digitally remastered, brought back to life for the modern age, as I shall be when I am beautiful again. Gallbladders fucking suck.
In the 1980s, Dr. Howard Moskowitz was asked by Campbell Soup to help them create the perfect pasta sauce. They had Prego, which was getting its ass kicked by ragu at the time, and they wanted the help of a preeminent market researcher to nail down that one winning formula, that one thing that'd see them beat the competition. Prego, objectively, was considered the superior sauce. Even those taste tested thought it was better, but that didn't matter. Ragu was king of the mountain, and not even quality could top it. Campbell's needed the pasta equivalent of a killer app. Moskowitz, however, didn't think that way. Before this, he'd worked with Pepsi to try and find the perfect level of sweetener in Diet Pepsi. He concluded there was no perfect level. There is no perfect Pepsi, he said, only perfect Pepsis. And this is what he told the Prego people. There is no perfect pasta sauce, only perfect pasta sauces. Moskowitz didn't try and find the perfect sauce. Instead, he had 45 very different sauces whipped up. He tried sauces with more garlic. He tried sweeter sauces, zestier sauces, all sorts of sauces, thick, thin, with solids, without solids. He then tested them on people and had them rate them. Armed with the data, he looked not for the most popular sauce, he looked for the most popular sauces to try and find the most common elements people liked. He found that there were roughly 3 types of pasta sauce consumer. Those that liked it plain, those that liked it spicy, and those that liked it extra chunky. That last note was a particular revelation because neither Prego nor ragu had extra chunky. Nobody had thought to provide it, and it's not like consumers asked for it because they hadn't even conceived of such a notion. Think about that for a second. A third of the consumer base wanted something that nobody was providing. Prego came out with an extra chunky, and the results were almost instant and ended with $600 million in the bank. And nowadays, you go to the pasta sauces in the supermarket and what do you see? Loads of different sauces. Ragu itself, having answered Prego's challenge, has 36 pasta sauces because there is no perfect pasta sauce, only perfect pasta sauces. This is a video game show, so why are we talking pasta? Well, Moskowitz's work in the 70s and 80s revolved around food, but his findings can be applied to the mainstream game industry fairly well. For example, let's cast Call of Duty as Ragu and Battlefield as Prego. Now, many would argue Battlefield is better than Call of Duty, but it's not as successful. Electronic Arts tries to beat Activision every year, throwing huge amounts of money in its advertising and in its game engines, trying to make a military shooter to defeat a military shooter. And the results? Well, financial disappointment and a resigning CEO, apparently. More and more, EA's homogenizing its games. The horror series Dead Space becoming a cooperative cover-based shooter. RPGs like Mass Effect and Dragon Age getting online modes. And it's not just EA, of course. Tomb Raider's getting multiplayer, Fear 3's getting co-op. More and more, games are all boasting the same feature sets, the same options, because publishers are pre-chunky Prego. They're all trying to distill the most successful elements of the most successful video games to create their very own perfect pasta sauce. And there is no perfect video game, there are only perfect video games. Call of Duty is a first-person shooter. It's the biggest game on the market, and so we have a ton of first-person shooters. Tons of them, all chasing the same audience. The audience that's already been won by Call of Duty. Meanwhile, we have underserved and unclaimed demographics ignored in this misguided rush to perfection. The best example we have recently is XCOM. Now, XCOM was originally rebooted as a shooter because 2K Games decided, just based on assumption, that strategy games can't succeed anymore, so bye-bye XCOM as a strategy game. Now, while the XCOM shooter struggled in development hell, at some point the company decided, seemingly under duress and just to shut the fans up, to release a little spin-off strategy title, Enemy Unknown. This, in XCOM terms, proved to be extra chunky, as it became a critical and commercial success to the point where it seems the FPS is now a phantom, possibly even due to be relaunched as its own IP, rather than tied to the now firmly strategy-powered XCOM name. Just think, there was this audience craving an XCOM strategy game, ready to spend their money, and 2K was gonna miss out on it. What else could there be? We're told horror games can't sell, we're told adventure games are dead, and yet the success of titles like Amnesia: The Dark Descent, the fascination with games like Slender, the overwhelming love of Telltale's Walking Dead, all seem to suggest there are audiences waiting in the wings, aching to be served. The mainstream publishers are ignoring huge amounts of gamers because their tunnel vision is causing them to focus so much on the one all-or-nothing killer app. They tell us horror and adventure can't sell. How would they know? They've not tried! Why not do a horror game as well as your obligatory first-person shooters? Why must everything be a massively budgeted AAA game? Why not make some mid-tier games with some mid-tier budgets to attract the mid-tier demographic? The big budget industry right now sees the market as two extremes. You've either got obscure failures or you've either got big franchise successes. It's ignoring everything in between. Meanwhile, we get some rare companies like Bethesda publishing a stealth-based single-player linear new IP like Dishonored and making, wait for it, money! Because there was an audience for stealth-based single-player linear new IPs that nobody else was considering. And sure, Dishonored probably didn't make Call of Duty money, but it made money. And some money is better than no money. And no money is what you get when you ignore 1/3 of the public. Prego learned that in the 80s, publishers more than ever need to learn it now.
I wonder if you can just drink saline. I'm in the best place to experiment, because if it goes horribly wrong, I'm in a hospital. But I probably won't drink saline. It's hard to improvise good comedy in a hospital when you've just got paper towels and a bag of saline. Thank God for me.